Have you ever been told that speaking in tongues is not for today? Maybe you've heard people speak in tongues and it seemed weird. You thought to yourself, this is too strange to be God. Or maybe you believe that people can still speak in tongues today, but that it's not for everybody. Whether you're skeptical or intrigued, whether you speak in tongues or don't, my new book, 9 Lies People Believe About Speaking in Tongues, is the book for you. Get your copy wherever Christian books are sold and head over to cbremner.com and click on the first link on the homepage for more information about how you can spread the word. Enjoy the show.
Dropping some knowledge and a little love. This is the Fire on Your Head podcast with your host, Steve Bremner. Steve Bremner, missionary to Peru and blogger at stevebremner.com. The podcast where we tackle gray areas your pastor doesn't talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Bremner.
Greetings and welcome to Fire on Your Head. And today's episode is very interesting. I say something, in every episode to encourage you that this episode is unique, or I've not done one like it. And that always is true, but today it is especially true. We're going to get to the interview I did with Matthew Robert Payne a few weeks ago. He's an Australian fellow author and minister of the gospel. And because of the time zone difference, I had to stay up really late one weeknight, and it was the afternoon the next day for him. So we had some complications, like me being tired, and there was construction going on outside of his house. So there's some moments where that's a little bit distracting, but not much. And so just want to give a few comments about it before we get going, a few updates. I know in last week's episode with Amber, I said that this week would be my interview with Dr. Brown, and we had to reschedule. We communicated we had to reschedule it again, but it does look like that episode is going to go live next week after this one, or maybe 2 weeks from now. But and then I'm gonna take a break, take maybe a few weeks where I don't post any new episodes. So this conversation with Matthew, we had never talked before. We've chatted or been connected on Facebook. So I turned the microphone on and we recorded our 2-hour conversation. And to be honest with you, that's really kind of my preferred way of recording the show, to just kind of turn the mic on and see how the conversation goes. But when I reach out to some people, they want to know, what do I want to talk to them about? So I can't just say, whatever comes up. Some people, we do have a specific topic, or or we frame the conversation around something. But with Matthew, I truly did not know what to expect. I did not know what we were going to get talking about. And so I figured we would probably talk about the prophetic and talk about angels, since those are books of his that he's known for, or that he's selling well. And I took a 10-minute clip of our conversation today and put the video on Facebook, and it got some reactions. The part of the conversation was kind of some key moments in our conversation about if prophets should really charge for personal prophecies. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, keep on listening. We're going to really elaborate on that in the conversation. So whenever I come up with a title for these episodes of the podcast, I try to come up with a title that corresponds to the episode. And, knowing that some titles are, it's just hard to come up with them. Like half the time I talk with Dave Edwards, we never know what to call our interviews. But today's episode, probably 2/3 of the conversation relates to prophetic ministry and charging. And I love navigating these topics. I love getting, sorting through charismatic stuff that there's some gray area, there's personal conviction, there's, what's the standard for how we should do this. And so I'll leave it at that. I won't say any more. I'm going to do something different than I normally do, and that's ask you to stick through this episode until the end. And, because I'm warning you, Matthew will say things that you don't know what to do with. I didn't. And there were some pauses. There were some, things where he even kind of said to me, Steve, I'd love to hear your opinion. And I couldn't think straight. I was processing what he said. And not only that, we recorded this about 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. On like a Tuesday night. So I was, as I listened to it and I'm editing it, I know I'm not exactly all there. It's not my favorite way to record a podcast. It's not as bad as the time I recorded the Dave Edwards late at night one time, where I couldn't stand to listen to myself when I edited it. I was more on top of things this time. But I'm going to ask you to stick around until the end, and I have an outro for you there. I'm going to cover some of my thoughts, some of my reactions that I really didn't clearly give Matthew during the conversation, because some things he said shocked me, and I truly didn't know how to argue with him, how to disagree. And when you get to those points, especially in the last half hour, last 20 minutes of this conversation, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And so if you listen to that and cut it off when Matthew and I are done talking and say goodnight, you might think like I'm endorsing or I agree with what he says, but stick to the end and hear my thoughts. And God bless you. And I hope you, if anything, that you enjoy and are sharpened and provoked to at least think about some of these things today with my conversation with Matthew Robert Payne.
So you've got the recording?
I do now. I was just about to give you a 1, 2, 3 count, but here we are, Matthew. So how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good. I always got a number of books lined up. I've got one book on angels that's having its final proofread this week. Someone on Facebook who's a good proofreader is going through it. I've had 2 other people go through it, and I went through it, and then sending it to her, and hopefully it'll get approved by Facebook, by Amazon's new standards, because they're getting tough on people. And so I've got that in its final week, and then I've got my copy editor has got a second book on the Prophetic that she's going through now, and then I've got a third book after that lined up to put through the process. But it's expensive. People don't realise books are expensive.
Yeah, but so to answer my question, how are you doing?
How am I doing? I just after 10 years. I went into church last Friday, and I only got to the first song, and I just left. I was just sad. I just left. Sad that in my church I know a lot of people, and they talk to me while I'm there, but no one rings me or no one meets up with me outside of church hours, and the only way to see the people from church is to actually go to church. And my feeling is a friend is someone who's been around to your place. A friend's someone that you do life with. You shouldn't have to, like, you can turn up to a shop and say hello to a shopkeeper anytime you like. It shouldn't have to be that way at church, So I left with, I'd gone to another church on the Sunday before, and they'd worshipped for over an hour, and it seemed that the Holy Spirit was in charge of the worship. They weren't just going to play their 3 songs and then stop. And I discerned, it says in Revelations 11 that I was giving a reed like a measuring rod, and I measured the worshippers there. And as they worshipped, I felt that 60% of the audience were really hungry, and it proved it when the worship went over for over an hour. Most people, most Christians wouldn't be able to endure that. And so when I left on the Friday, I realised that I can't be a schizophrenic Christian. I can't go to 2 churches and commit myself to 2. So I decided that I'd move to this new church. So there was like a ripping away, a bit of sadness, like a bee sting gives a third of its body when it stings and it actually dies. There was this ripping away from my church I've been for 10 years. So it caused some sadness. But on the second week of the new church, they go out for dinner after church and fellowship. And
everybody?
No, but about 20 of them. And I spent last week, I had a friend, how it started was I got a prophecy on a Facebook group that I run, and the prophecy said that I'm going to start a training school for the prophetic. And I wrote to a prophet I know in Europe and showed him the prophecy. He said, you need to connect with an apostle or a prophet to help you steward this, to come alongside of you. And I thought of this person I'd met at conferences and was a friend on Facebook. And so I wrote to him and I said, can we meet up? And he said, come to my church and I'll talk to you after church. And that was his church. So I wasn't even in the process of church hunting, but I went there and he was having his Vision Sunday. The pastor was having the Sunday where he speaks about how far they've come and where they're going with their church and their goals. And it was just the right week to turn up to a church to hear all about them.
Right.
And their church is largely prophetic, and I'm prophetic. And so everyone in the church would love to get a prophecy. So it just seems like a good fit. But it caused a bit of a tearing away. There was a bit of hurt inside me. So that's how I am. I'm sort of excited plus sad, you know?
Yeah, I didn't expect that. I didn't know what you would answer with, because for the listeners' benefit, this is our first time ever having a conversation outside of like chatting or something on online. So we're getting to know one another a bit, aren't we? Yeah. So it's no secret to anyone that might see this video, you're not in your teens. You're not a teenager. No. You've been around a bit. So how long have you been writing books? How long have you been blogging, writing, any of that stuff?
Well, how long I've been writing is probably about 10 years. I started a prophetic website about 10 years ago called personalprophecyfree.com, and I received prophecies from people who wanted to request a prophecy via email. And then I signed up to these feeds on how to increase your website's popularity. And one of them came through one day that I opened. You don't normally open all of them. They become like spam after a while. But this day I felt led to open one. I opened it and it said, if you write articles on an article database like e-rsquo, you can put a link to your website down the bottom, and the more links that you have to your website, the higher you'll go up in the search engines. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Okay, so I searched e-zine articles.
Do you know I did the same thing?
Did you?
E-zine...
e-zine articles.
But that wasn't the only one with me. I think about 2008 or so when I discovered that, I heard about that. I had just started my website that wasn't yet called Firepress, and I was doing that with some of my articles. I would do that. I would put them there and link to the website. And
yeah.
And how long did you do that for?
Well, I did that for about 5 years, a few years anyway. My first article was 10 ways you can witness to strangers, and that was my first article, 10 tips to witnessing to strangers. And then I just got in the habit of writing emails. I went through this stage where I suffered whatever time of night I went to bed. I couldn't get up to about 5 or 6 o'clock the next day in the afternoon. And I got up really, really depressed and really, really tired. And I used to take sleeping tablets around 9 o'clock to get to sleep again. And I'd sleep again for another 20 hours. And it was a real time of suffering. The only way I could beat it, I've got bipolar, and the only way I could beat it was just to stay up. And so I used to start staying up for 1 or 2 or 3 nights in a row. And on those nights, I used to write 4 articles over the night. Like, a lot of my articles were 2,000 words. It took me an hour to write. And I used to...
Wait. You write 2,000 words in an hour?
Yeah, I think so. 4 pages. 4 Microsoft pages.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was about an hour.
So you're a typing machine then.
Well, I can type about 25 words a minute, not really fast, not like a professional typist. I think that's what I write. I think I sit down. I've got a book called Conversations with God, and most of them end up being about 1,600 words, and it doesn't take me more than an hour to type them. Yeah.
I think I'm about the same. I have a fast typing rate, but you're talking about sitting down and having some laser focus to write 2,000 words articles in a night.
Yeah. I'd just come up with the title and then I'd start. As soon as I had the title, I'd be typing, and I was just essentially taking dictation of the Holy Spirit. Although a lot of my articles were legalist sort of articles, I had the idea of an angry God and a vengeful God, and a lot of those articles should be taken down. It's just too much hassle to read them. And
right. It sounds like we have a very similar journey in the time frame you're talking about. My experience with God. I don't know if you found this, or maybe you did, but did you find eventually that having articles on e-zines stopped working about 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, it just had no effect anymore.
Well, do you know why? There was a Google update. It was called Panda, and what happened was they basically, Google, like for people who don't know, what happens is Google is always updating how they make relevant search results show up for people who type in something, right? So say they type in something about the prophetic. They type in a specific phrase, and then there'll be a bunch of results. So what happens is there's various ways, and I'm not going to bore the listener, but there's various ways that Google determines what is the most relevant search result to be number one for like when you type something in. And in like 2011 or so, they did a huge update that made it useless to have your articles on e-zines, because that's what people were doing, is they would have all their people were putting a lot of articles on that website for what you're talking about to like link to their sites. And so there's people who were gaming the system. And so Google did this update. And there's other people too who basically make websites just so they can put Google ads on their website, and they game the system and do all these things so that the traffic goes to their site and they make money. And so like basically Google knocked these websites in the kneecaps, basically, and fixed that. And websites like e-zines basically started having a lot less effect. So there's good and there's bad to that. But Google,
I didn't know that happened. I just know that when I put my new website up, I transferred all my links to my new prophetic website, and it didn't seem to have an effect on my thing. And I said, wow, I've got 700 links coming in, and it has had no effect.
It did in the past, but it's not. See, like they call it search engine optimization, SEO.
Yeah.
And SEO is a constantly changing beast, So like what might have worked last year might stop working now. And so anyway, not to bore the listeners, but I thought, if you started using these e-zine websites the same time I did, I wonder if you had the same experience as I did, where it was like early 2011, and there's always, they call it the Panda update. There's always a Panda update, and but that was like the first, it was a major one, and but yeah, that's very. It's interesting to me because it sounds like aside from our age and experiences in life, maybe some of our online writing journey parallels a bit, as far as the time frame goes.
I started writing articles, and then I started making videos also about 7 years ago, and I made a series of videos on. I got this printout, the parables of Jesus, and I got this printout of 54 parables and their addresses. You could probably still find it on Google if you typed it in. And I was up to my fourth video. You could only do 10-minute videos on YouTube at that time, and that was the limit. But I got up to my fourth video, and I was doing them in order of, at the first four, I was doing in order of what I knew, and the parables I liked. And when I got up to the fourth one, Jesus said, "You're going to make this into a book. You're going to have these transcribed and made into a book." So that's how I found out about my first book. I was 4 videos in. Then I got it transcribed by a Filipino, and the typing wasn't good. And then it took a lot of editing, and it cost me a lot, that book, to make. But it still sells about 10 or 15 copies a month, and it's a really good description of the parables,
Right.
So I started writing books about 4 years ago, and then my second book was done on videos too. I'd already had the videos done, and that was called The Prophetic Supernatural Experience, and that was about the life of the prophet and the office of prophet, but really simply. So many people have complex books and hard to understand books, and I just wanted a book out there that someone who has had it prophesied over them that they're called to be a prophet could pick up and understand, well, this is what I'm called to. It was a simple book, so that was my second book. Yeah, I'm making all my books 99 cents now. There's a guy called Adam Hoog who's got lots of books, and all his books are 99 cents. And my brother asked me a couple of years ago, what would you prefer, more readers or would you prefer to make money? And I said, I prefer more readers. And he said, well, make your books 99 cents.
Right.
And so I've changed. I've got some of my books through a publisher who, if I put my Kindle book through him, it's got to be $3.99 or whatever because he wants his cut. But I can, through my publisher, I can own the Kindle book myself. And so I've been doing that and letting him handle the paperback. And when I have the Kindle book, I just make them 99 cents. I want people to have information.
Right. I feel the same way. It's a tough balance, isn't it? Like, because there's I don't know if we started recording when you said this, that it's expensive, with editing and, hiring out a graphic artist, to do your covers, having proofreading, editing. It's, if one has the financial capital to do that and then, put the book out there cheap, I'm all for it. I would love to have thousands of people read my books and not care about what they're priced, So so there's this balance or this tension. I think authors, especially if you feel burdened and you've got something from God that you want to share with as many people as possible, you want it to be accessible. And so
I'm really I've got a prophetic website where people request a prophecy and it costs them 30 Australian dollars. And the Lord led me into that last July.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah, I've got a prophecy.
And you probably know the question I'm going to ask you.
How do I feel that I can charge?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a judgmental aspect of how I'm going to ask you that, but that is something I'm curious about. And I've read some of the things on your website where you explain that, and I respect that. So I'll give you a space to talk about that, obviously. And
radio. Well, first of all, it wasn't even on my radar, and I I pay a guy called Jeremy Lopez to give me prophetic words every few months, or whenever I feel like I want a bit of direction or I want some insight from someone else. And so I pay him $40 American, and I'm pleased to pay it because his prophecies always have direction in it for me, like words of wisdom, and they're always really helpful, and it's worth the money. And that's the argument with books. When you make your books for free or 99 cents, are people really valuing what you've got to say? You know, when they've paid $9.99, they place more stock in what you've said because they've spent hard money to get it, and so they would consider it more importantly than a free book. I used to pay him, and then he came out with this prophecy that said, I'm going to go into business, and business wasn't even on my radar. And I saw advertisement for a prophetic site run by Kent Simpson, and you could join up and be on his prophetic team and charge for prophecies. And I read his reasonings for charging for prophecy, and decided to join up with him. But what I realised, and I started my own site at the same time, I started my own website at the same time and advertised it on my Facebook groups, and I was getting more work from my own website, and I only got 2 prophecy requests through Ken Simpson's site, but you had to pay him like 200 Australian dollars a month, like for rent on his site, and so it wasn't even covering that, so I dropped off that. But I'd already taken the plunge to start my own, what it was as a business, because it couldn't be a ministry because it is too much complication to be a tax-free status, and it was above my pay grade. And so I got this accountant for $40 an hour that would do my books, and he told me how to do an Excel spreadsheet and do my income and expenses on that sheet. And he solved my trepidation about going into business. So that's been going successful, and that's been paying for my books. I published 6 books last year, and they've all been funded by people requesting prophecies.
Okay, so can I jump in on that? So
yeah,
the way you're able to publish books and make them so cheap that the books aren't profitable for you is because you're getting income, or you're getting finances from this other way of blessing people who are paying for what they value in it. I'm understanding you right.
Yeah, so I get about $500 a month from prophecy requests, about 15 prophecy requests a month. And what I can say is it really comes down, my mother explained it simply. In Africa, they used to give the people in Africa clothing, and they'd give them good clothing, and they'd turn up all muddy and wrecked with holes in them and stuff. And the Africans didn't respect the clothing, and so they decided to charge just a little bit of money for the clothes, and they found that the Africans treated it like their Sunday best, and the clothes stayed in a good condition, and they really looked after the clothes because they'd bought them. And there's something to the fact that when you get something free, you don't really have much weight. There's not a lot of weight in it.
Right.
I've run prophetic websites for years. Like I've done 10,000 prophecies for free, and I found that when you run prophetic websites on Facebook, people they join 6 free prophetic websites and request a prophecy off all of them, and we had to put a limit on one of the groups that I started to run, that you could only request a prophecy once a month, and now it's run by someone else, but it's once every 3 months. People just have got this insatiable appetite to get prophecies, but in a good prophecy, it should have a word of wisdom. It should have a direction, like a direction of God. And if you don't do the directions, if you don't obey God in the directions, it holds off the prophecies, and the prophecies don't materialize in your life because you're not doing what God said to do. It's if you do this, then I'll do this sort of situation with a lot of prophecies. So, you can't be, if you're called to the nations to be a famous preacher, your prophecies might come out with, I want you to study the word more, and I want you to bury yourself in the word. And if you take 10 years to obey that, well, it'll be 10 years before you're invited to the nations because you've got to know the word. So these people that skip and hop between prophetic websites, they're getting told things off the Lord, but they're not doing it. But if you pay $30 for a prophecy, you're more likely to do what God said to do. Not always. I see you nodding your head. Not always. Well, then
that nodding that you see me doing is like, okay. I'm tracking with you. I'm because if you were to tell me, let's just put it this way, on Twitter or my website and stuff, I have people that contact me and they're things like, yeah, check out this ministry of, if you PayPal me and I'll deliver you a prophetic word. 2 or 3 years ago, I just delete those. I'm just like, peddling the word of God or whatever my reaction would be, right?
Yeah.
But then when I don't know if it was on your site or I saw you post in the writers group or something where you explained kind of like what you're explaining now about when people they value things more of that they pay for. I'm like, okay, well, as an author and people who buy my book are usually the ones who read it or they contact me about it or they sometimes review it or whatever. That's different than when it's given away free or it's cheap. So it's like, from writing and having invested a lot of my own capital to do that, like this, this microphone sitting here in my face, coming up with the money or having people bless me so that I can afford things that are like an investment that doesn't pay tangible cash, but has value in these other ways. I get that. I get I get that. I have less. No, let's just say, if you and I talked 3 years ago, I would have had a harder time swallowing it. If you telling me about charging for prophecies, but I'm in 100% agreement with you that people value things more that they pay for than if it's just free. I've seen that in my ministry here.
And do you know what I found? At least close to half, or between third and half the money I've earned since July when I started my website has been donations that people have just given me money. 3 people have given me over $500 just as a love offering. And for 5 years I ran the email prophecy website, and I only had 5 people donate money. I had on the thing, this is free, but here's a PayPal, and if you feel led by the Lord to donate, we'd love your donation. Only 5 people ever felt led to give me money. They felt led to request a prophecy, and they felt led to get a prophecy, and only 1 in 5 people write back and say thank you and give feedback. It was 1 in 5. After a couple of months of doing it, I said to the Lord, you're going to have to answer me this one. I know you asked me to start the prophecy website, but you're going to have to answer me. Why aren't people sending me, I ask them for feedback and I ask them to give a response. Why are only 1 in 5 people giving me a response? If you don't answer me this question, I'm going to give this up. And he said, remember when I healed the 10 lepers? And I said, yeah. He said, only 1 of them came back and said, thank you.
Wow.
And I said, yeah. And then he laughed and he said, you're getting twice the response of me.
Wow. Well, do you know what I want to compare that to? Is you may know about me, or maybe you don't, but I'm a missionary here in Peru, and so some of the book writing is to supplement like support, and what I do down here, isn't for pay, so it's like I got to pay my bills somehow and stuff, and we're starting our 4th year of doing a ministry school, and we've basically learned the hard way. And this is our 1st year where it costs money to be in it.
Yeah.
Because we, my leaders, Mark and Anna, they had some sponsors and benefactors who basically helped pay so that there was these 2 apartments they rented where students in their school could come and live for free there. And at first they were providing everything, including, an allowance for food, the bills for these apartments and stuff. Then eventually the students had to get their own food. They had to pay for their own food. They had to, work or find a way of getting income. And the school, we were just offering it free of charge. There was no cost. And we, I had a hunch from a little sooner than others, but still it took me being hit in the face that, this isn't work. Some people are benefiting from it and appreciating it and coming around and realizing this is a great thing they've been given. But like a few others were definitely not. And I think in the last year we kind of decided, okay, we need to charge like a tuition, not even like a high tuition, but something. And so we've changed it now, and we've got like the apartments, each room costs something to rent it, and we've modified our hours so we're at they can get jobs and work in this culture, in this rhythm of life, and attend our school. We've made homework more than we did before. And I'm saying this carefully because I probably should double check with my leaders what kind of testimony I'm giving about this. But we basically learned the hard way that giving stuff away for free. I can think of a couple people who I don't know if they wanted to be in the school or they decided to be in the school because we suggested to them, hey, this would be good for you. But then they were the ones who we would have these lack of gratitude and stuff like that, like you're talking about with prophecies. And so then we changed it this year. And until 2 or 3 weeks ago, we didn't know if anyone would be in the school or not now that we're charging, because people kept contacting us saying, yeah, I want to do it the free way like you've been doing. We're not doing it that way anymore. And now we've got these young ladies who they all sought us out to be in this school. One of them paid like 2,000 or 3,000 souls up front. So like her year's worth of tuition, which is like, to translate that into American dollars, it's like $60 or $70 a month. It's not like, you have to take out a student loan or something, And so we're at the beginning of that. I don't know how this next year is going to go, but I'm willing to bet you the challenges we face this year will be different than they were before with people who, they were given it free. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not to say everyone who went through it free didn't appreciate it, didn't benefit from it, because now we've got like one couple who are on our leadership team who were in our school the first year we did it, So, I mean, it's not like giving it free failed, for everyone or whatever. And, I'm probably being harsher than the reality really is, but, I hear you about, giving and pouring yourself out.
I had to get over this paid for prophecy because anyone who, I was pretty vocal in my day about charging for prophecies when I was doing it for free. Then what I found is a lot of the free prophecy sites, Facebook, I was the first one on Facebook that started a prophecy site. I was the first one that started a prophecy site via email in the world. Like, I was a forerunner. Like, the first one that you get prophecies via email was me. And the first one on Facebook was me. And then other people follow. But what I find on the free prophecy Facebook sites is they're all beginners. They're all people that have got a gift of prophecy just started and they want to practice. And so there's not weighty words. They're not strong, big, weighty words that you hear off a prophet. So on those prophecy websites, it's hard to get one of the team members who's in the office of prophet to do your prophecy and do a weighty word. So that's what I found. I went seeking after people that charge because I was after hearing a word off a prophet, So I was quite happy, and I'm quite happy to drop $60 on a prophecy from Jeremy because I know it's going to speak to me in the moment, And I had one I got off him, and it didn't make a lot of sense, but I put them all in a file because you don't throw them away. because you've paid for it. And 3 months later, I went through this tremendous attack, and the prophecy said you're going to have a shaking, and everything that's not of God's going to shake off the table, and there's going to be this tremendous shaking, and a lot of things are going to be lost. And 3 months later, I had this tremendous attack on Facebook, and someone wrote to 300 out of 400 people on my group and said, Matthew's practicing necromancy, he's a false prophet. And it was this shaking, and I picked up this prophecy, and I read this prophecy, and it gave me peace that the 100 people, the 200 that withstood the attack, that stayed, become a foundation of a group that's got 2,500 people in it now. And it was this shaking, and it was being fulfilled, and this prophecy held me. If I hadn't have got that prophecy, if I didn't have that prophecy, I would have been shaken a lot more. But the fact that I had this 2-page prophecy that was talking about this shaking really blessed me. So I find that people who are prepared to pay haven't got a problem with paying.
Right.
If they're seeking out a prophecy and they want one free, well, there's places they can get them for free.
Right.
But if they're prepared to pay, they don't. I have never had anyone request a prophecy and write back to me and say, I'm really upset that I had to pay for this.
Are they? Have you ever had anyone ask for a refund?
I haven't had anyone. I had one person who said that my word didn't seem to hit them right. They wrote feedback, and they said that it didn't seem to sing. And I said, I can do 2 things for you. I missed with that one, quite obviously. I can seek the Lord for another word with you, and you can give me feedback on that. Or I can just refund your money. What do you choose? And he wrote back and he said, I'd love another word. And thank you for being so humble to say that you missed. And I gave him another word, and he said that was right on. So a wrong spirit can speak through a prophet any time. We had the history of Israel where they wanted to do something. I think God wanted to set the army up to fail. And he said, I'll send the prophets a lying spirit. And he sent all the prophets of the land a lying spirit. And there was one prophet that said, you're wrong, you're not going to have success, you're going to surely fail. And God was testing him whether they'd listen to his true prophet. But the other people were prophets too, and they were just speaking via a lying spirit. So I've had a wrong spirit speak through me, so the whole prophecy was wrong and totally off. People have got to have the courage to write back and say, this didn't resonate with me. Even if they're getting a free prophecy, someone who's prophetic, you really do them a good service giving them feedback. And they may have happened that they did 4 prophecies that day and all of them were off. And it just means I've been outside and I've picked something up or carried something into their house with them, and I've prophesied from the wrong spirit. Right. Satan would really like to injure people.
Right. See, I have no idea because I'm just getting to know you in this conversation. I have no idea if you're being hard on yourself or not. But one thing that comes to mind too is it could very well be sometimes, like, you can explain this to me if I'm off. A word might not have like a now fulfillment, but it might be for like you mentioned earlier in this conversation. If you're called to the nations and your words right now are like to study the word and stuff like that. I say that because I remember in 2003 or 2004. I lived in Charlotte or Concord, North Carolina, and because I don't know if I told you in our little chat before we were calling each other about the Brownsville revival, and I lived in Pensacola, and I went to Fire School of Ministry, where it moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. So the first year or maybe the second year, but it was when we'd first moved up there. We would go to Morning Star, Rick Joyner's ministry, and on Friday nights there's School of the Spirit. And I remember and they may still do this. They probably do. They would do this thing where at the end of the service, let me back up a little bit. It was, like they might have a guest speaker or one of their faculty or whoever preaches that night. But at the beginning, they would have a student do a 10-minute preach, before the main service. And also at the end, there was healing teams and there was prophetic teams. And you could get like a card. And when it was your turn, go to, whatever team you had requested that you could receive ministry from. And there were these groups of threes, there'd be 3 people on the prophecy teams where you could go and you'd sit in one of their booths and they would pray and then they would tell you what they feel the Lord's saying. And you had 10 minutes with them. And they would tell you, we need you to give us feedback when we're done because, we're students. And one of them would be, an older, more seasoned person and the other 2 young. And if I'm getting it wrong, then somebody can correct me. But the way I remember it was like somebody really seasoned and 2 people who were, learning.
That would be the correct way to do it.
Yeah, and it was great. And so I would take a notepad. I would try to write down everything I could get while they were doing this. And so where I'm going with this, I'm not, is my point I just mentioned a moment ago about things might not make sense at the time. So I remember one time, the second or third time I ever received ministry like this from them, like it always knocked my socks off. It always blessed me. So this one time, there was this one girl who seemed really like not arrogant, but she was definitely like, just chewing her bubble gum, like, yeah, we're gonna like read your mail, and it's gonna be pretty accurate, and you don't need to react and let us know. And it was just there's just something about her attitude that rubbed me the wrong way. But then she said that she sees me like a disc jockey or something like this, and I'm like writing this down, but then when I went home, I'm like laughing about it with my roommates, like, disc jockey? I hate hip hop music. I hate like rap and stuff. My roommates know I listen to really like hardcore type of rock and stuff like that. Like how does she see disc jockey? I have no idea. What? Okay, well they're new at this. They're learning. She might be off. But then I didn't know what podcasting was.
Yeah.
Okay. That wasn't
around then.
It wasn't a thing yet. And it was like 2007. Well, before that, I was starting to check them out and listen to them. But it was 2007. I went for it and gave one a shot with my friend Dan, and with little less sophisticated stuff than you're looking at. And so one year I was back in Charlotte, and someone told me, "Hey, do you remember that prophecy? How that you were making fun of that girl who said you were like a disc jockey? Well, maybe it wasn't a disc jockey, but like, disc jockey like music, but like, like host. Maybe she saw you like, in terms of your podcast and stuff like that. And without knowing it was a podcast, without knowing what that was, but like, she just told you how she saw it and what God was showing her. And I was like, okay, I'll give you that. That makes sense. That it was like a word that God was showing her something, like the Apostle John, right? Like he wrote the book of Revelation in the vision and things God was showing him that might not have made sense to him.
Yeah, they still don't make sense to people.
Yeah, but there's things that like people can read that afterwards and have some idea what he was saying that he might not have. But obviously there's still room for caution in that kind of stuff. So I'm just saying, whether it was a false spirit or something or not, that's God knows, and maybe he spoke to you and told you. But how do you know that person might not have? It might have been a thing like a disc jockey prophecy where it would make sense later,
I don't know. All I can take is a person's word. One time someone said, I did a false word and they rejected the word. And it was right in the middle of 5 prophecies that I'd done. And it was like the 3rd prophecy, and the first 2 were dead on, and the 2 after that person were dead on. And so at that time I doubted that a wrong spirit had jumped in the middle. And so I told the person, well, just put it on the back shelf and don't totally disregard it, that could come true in the future. And so the person said they'd do that. So I always side on the side of humility. I think the prophets in the Bible in the Old Testament, they were one of the only spokesmen that the people had, so they had to be accurate. But I think one of the reasons why prophets miss today is that sense of humility. If you were a prophet that never missed, and you had a reputation of getting a true 10, 15-minute word off God every time you gave one, you'd develop this following where you'd be like godlike, and you'd take the responsibility off a person to go to God themselves. And so I think that's one of the main reasons that God allows someone prophetic to miss, because let's face it, you've got these, you're not in America, but you hear a lot of American news. There's so many prophets that are speaking out about who the president is. Now, I've got a Jesus that talks to me that's not really Jesus. It's like an antichrist spirit that trips me up from time to time. Used to trip me up a lot, but now it rarely does. But I was in bed talking to Jesus one night, and I was watching Donald Trump, and Jesus said, he's the next president. I'm going to have him become the new president. But I've only said that on one thread on Facebook. I haven't made a major post. Jesus told me.
Well, you just said it on this podcast.
Yeah, I just said it there. I don't mind. I'm just honest. I'm using it in the example that you could be wrong. So that could have been the false Jesus talking to me in my bed at that time, saying Trump's the next president. But I'm not called to often to give national prophetic words. It's not my calling. And if I was a political like Doug Addison or someone who's got this big calling, I may, or Rick Joyner, who's called to the nations, if I was one of those people, I might release a prophetic word that God said that Trump's going to be president, but it's not in my sphere, and so I don't feel that I achieve anything saying God told me that Trump's going to be president. But I really hope he is. Gee, that causes some conflict when you say that to people. I've listened to about 40 hours of him speaking, 40 or 50 hours. I've read 2 books by him, his recent book about all his policies and stuff, and I really admire him. But what I find interesting about the people in the States is they're so damn vocal about presidents that they don't like, They're so disrespecting of that office of power. Daniel served the foreign king.
Exactly.
And Joseph served the foreign king. And we look up to Joseph, who saved Egypt, and we look up to Daniel as mighty prophets, but they served foreign kings that were unbelievers.
And you know about Nebuchadnezzar, right? He wasn't just like a wicked king. I mean, he was wicked. He was the king of Babylon, who, you look at what Assyria did, and because every year in our school, in our first year, I teach this course called The History of Israel, where we take 2 weeks to go through 2 weeks every morning to go through from after Exodus, after Moses and when Joshua led Israel into the promised land, and up until the end of the Old Testament, the prophets, and they've been exiled and they've gone back and rebuilt. So we cover that in just 2 weeks. It's pretty daunting. But one thing I always focus on, or a common thread that I try to make sure the students are getting from start to finish, is that kind of stuff. So I'm saying this: Assyria was the Al Qaeda of that region in that day, and then Babylon was ISIS. You know what I mean? Babylon had basically conquered Assyria. By the time they conquered the You remember this? This is midnight for me, So I'm not exactly banging on all cylinders. And so the Israel, Judah, right? Yeah. Like the Judah lasted longer, right? And so you got to keep in mind that like Daniel was serving like if he were in the heartland of ISIS, you know what I mean? Like in conquered Iraq territory, and God used him there. You know what I mean? And then, and I agree with you. I'm an outsider as far as America goes, but a lot of my audience is American, so I don't know if they'll be offended by this or they'll appreciate our take on from the outside looking in. But it amazes me how there's so little respect that's shown towards their political leaders. Yeah, I don't know how it is in Australia.
I know how outspoken people are about Trump, and who they're talking about could be their next president. And they're so outspoken. And I get the opinion from most of those who speak that they could do a better job.
Sure.
And it's obvious I've never listened to 50 hours of Trump speak on his feet. He speaks on his feet. He doesn't have notes. He doesn't speak to a teleprompter. You're going to have someone who uses language, and he uses flavoursome language.
Right.
But he said, does he have to be? He was talking about being more presidential, and he said, is being more presidential just standing there and people insulting you and you're saying nothing back? Is that what you want from your president?
Right.
How would you like me to do that with other countries? That's what you're doing with other countries. Other countries are abusing you, and you're not standing up for yourself and fighting back.
Right. And, how is it in Australia where you are? How does the church treat its leaders when they don't like them or they're not the ones they elected?
First of all, only 5% of Australians go to church. Right? So we're an atheist nation. We actually had a female prime minister for a while that was an atheist that was living with her boyfriend. Right? So, Australia, a lot of Australia were happy to have their first female president. Some said that, some wondered about her sexuality, but she had a husband and she was a self-confessed atheist, and she was running our country. Here's the point I want to get to, Steve. I'd love to share this point. Christians want Jesus to solve their problem and bring revival, right? Christians want a president that will solve their problems and being a good Christian and act laws, Christian laws, and reverse all sorts of laws as a Christian that are only going to be reversed in 4 years when the other non-Christian gets in. But they want a president to solve all the problems. Jesus said, shine your light. Jesus said, be a light. Jesus said, be love. Jesus said, heal the sick, cast out devils, bring people to me, teach everyone, make disciples of all men, teach them everything that I taught you. Jesus told us to be the difference. We don't need a president to be the difference. We need to be the difference. And if there's poverty in the world, if there's struggling in the world, if there's trouble in the world, it's the Christian church that's responsible. It's them that's not doing their job. So they think that calling down revival from heaven, a supernatural work from heaven, it's going to solve all their problems. What's going to solve their problems is them not gossiping when they're at work about their boss or another person at work. Is saying, I don't participate in gossip. I'm not going to have anything to do with this conversation. I see Matthew as a really nice person and he really tries his best. And that's all I've got to say about Matthew. And if you want to continue speaking negatively, I'm going to leave the conversation. That's how Christians should be acting. They should be light. And they want this saviour to come and save their nation. I would rather a Cyrus, I would rather a non-Christian with great ethics run my country than someone who says they're a Christian just for lip service. Right. The Pope accused Trump of not being a Christian, and Trump said, I'm a Christian. Look, Trump believes he is, and if he had a running mate like that doctor that was running,
Ben Carson.
Ben Carson, if Ben Carson took Trump through some discipleship, you'll find that Trump probably wouldn't have a problem with the Christian ethos. He certainly has got a lot of Christians that really like him and are on board with him. But we've got to get away from thinking that we're going to have a saviour. We had a saviour once and we crucified him. And if someone came back as Jesus Christ today, he'd be crucified in less than 3 years.
Right.
You know, it wouldn't take 3 years for the Christians to string him up. You know?
Yeah.
You know, I see on Facebook all the time, don't kill babies, and terrible pictures of babies being killed in the womb. I've never seen on Facebook, I've been to heaven and I've mixed with the abortions in heaven and played with them and spoke to them, and they want you to come up here, Mum, get to know Jesus because your children are waiting for you. That message, I did that message. I did a really nice message like that. And I said, you want to do something for your friends and the world, share this. And 50 people shared it. It was my most shared post. But that's where every abortion goes. They go to heaven. But Christians think picketing in an abortion clinic or speaking out against abortion is going to save it. We all know that we shouldn't put our hand on the stove, but if you tell a child not to do it, they'll do it. You know, Andrew Womack says you can walk down the street with glass houses, and you could be walking past all these beautiful beachfront glass houses, and at the last house there could be a sign saying, don't throw rocks at house, it'll break the glass. And immediately people will pick up rocks and throw it at the house because they've been told not to. So when are Christians going to get it in their heads that Jesus called them to be the light? Jesus called them to change the nation. The person that's without money, that's homeless on the street, that person that served, that veteran that served in the war, that person that you walk past with a sign, please help me, I'm homeless, that's the person, that's Jesus there. That's you walking past Jesus saying you haven't got spare change. You know, if the sheep and the goats parable, if that sheep and the goats parable was who was going to get into heaven, heaven wouldn't have many people in it. Would it?
No.
You know, the Christians are pretty good at pointing the finger, but I've got very few friends because I take Jesus as what he said and I obey Jesus. And I find that non-Christians love me. I find among the prostitutes and the drug addicts and the pimps, I'm a friend. But I find around Christians, I'm called too intense. I'm too intense for him, and I make him feel guilty because all of my money and all of my time is spent on the kingdom. And even when I'm relaxing watching TV, God's giving me messages and insights and revelations for my next book. Well, he's downloading things to me. So even the characters in TV are ministering to me.
Wow. Can I back up to this thing about
back up to anywhere you like.
Yeah, the thing about respecting like leaders. No, I lived in America during the 2004 election, and that was, if you remember, between George W. Bush and John Kerry, and then I remember when John McCain and Barack Obama. And one thing that surprises me, like night and day, was you overlook when your guy does stuff wrong in the church, but the other guy, he can't do anything right. Yeah. And I'd watch people post, and if I question anything, I was in my early 20s in those days when I was in seminary and I lived in the States and stuff. Well, not seminary, Bible college, and I remember it was like, well, Steve, you can have that opinion and ask those questions about the president, but do you pray for him? Do you pray for him? Like, there'd be this kind of like, he's not your president, you're from Canada, so like you can't have an opinion. But then some of these same people are the ones who they turn around and become the people posting everything about Obama. You know, how he's basically like the spawn of Satan himself or something. And it was just like, it's curious to me how you have to respect God's anointed is so strong of a belief. But then, he's not really God's anointed if he's like the I'll say Democratic, president or whatever. And, I got some listeners I know who are Obama supporters and others who aren't. So when you were talking, like the Lord told me to hold up, and be careful what I say, not say something I was going to you. But what I'm saying, the only reason I'm saying that is to say, like in Canada, we just got a new prime minister a few months ago, right? I don't know if you've heard about that, but the whole world is like in love with him and Justin Trudeau, and look at that hair and a very, very liberal sided. And we just had this other guy, Stephen Harper, for the last 10 years. And I liked him, in the end, I couldn't say I could back up everything he's said and done in his tenure, but like of all the options there were, I was kind of like, I don't know if he's going to stay prime minister or not. But when I was back in Canada, I remember going to the local Walmart, and there's a stop sign, like, where you're going into the parking lot and you stop and you look and make sure no one's coming, and, then you can take a right or a left there. And somebody had vandalized that sign and wrote Harper underneath stop. So like it said, stop Harper. And I saw several signs like that. I don't know if it was like a trend or something that happened while I was away, but I'm like, he's my guy, but I think that's hilarious. That people were not hilarious like I approve of it, but just more like it made me laugh when I saw it. And in Canadian culture, you can like not like the prime minister, but you're not going to see that it's Christians who are by and large the ones calling for him to be thrown out of office or all this kind of stuff. If right now, I don't expect to log into Facebook or when I'm back in Canada to basically listen to the church go on about how evil Justin Trudeau is. Not nearly to the extent like you watch it happen in America. I don't know if it's a cultural thing. I don't know if it's how and like I've discussed.
I mustn't have many Australian friends because I must just have American friends, because I honestly can't. I only had one friend who was strongly supporting one party in Australia, and I'd see him posting about the wrong of the current Prime Minister. But he's the only one I've seen on my post. But I mightn't have many Australian friends. But all I know is Americans will bash whoever's in. There's 50% of them will bash. And it's just, I just feel it's not respectful, you can travel in a dream and in a vision and go and see Obama and set him straight. You can get permission off the Lord to do that if you want to change him. You're not going to change him by telling all your friends there's so many people saying Obama's the Antichrist. They're going to be, I wish they'd be held accountable to what they're saying in a year's time when he's not president anymore. It's just...
Well, do you remember Paul, like the conditions of what it was like being underneath Rome when Paul wrote things like, respect your leaders and they were under Nero. You know what I mean? They were being killed by their government. And, and not just that, but even if you look at, I lost my train of thought, like I said, it's late here, but by and large, you, me, and American listeners, we live in countries where we aren't being put to death for our faith. Like one third of us in our parts of the world. I mean, obviously, you can change that if we go talk about China or the Middle East or something. But like where we find ourselves on the planet at the moment, we're not under that. And Paul was telling the church, like, pray for those who persecute you. Stuff like that, so sometimes I post questions like that on Facebook, and I basically get dumped on. Well, Steve, you're Canadian. This isn't your, and so I lighten up a lot late.
It's amazing how they'll agree with something that they agree with, but as soon as you say something they disagree with, apparently you're Canadian.
Yeah.
Well, we're all following a Jew, right?
Right.
Jesus, I've got a friend who I drink with at Toastmasters, and he says he often says to Christians, Jesus wasn't a Catholic. And he says he really offends people,
Right.
by saying that. And he said, Jesus wasn't a Christian either, Matthew. And I said, yeah, he was a Jew.
Right.
And he says, yeah. He says, Jesus was a radical, and we need something to change us.
Yeah.
The sad thing is, the reason why this is the first time I've ever been involved in politics in America, but America controls the world. If America goes down, if their trillion-dollar debt goes from 19 trillion to 25 trillion, they say, when it gets to that stage, that people are saying America's going to enter like a black hole, and it's going to take the whole world down. Something's got to be done, and it just can't be talk. Mm-hmm. What I find is that people are just talkers. They talk. I could plan a homeless person outside a convention, a Christian convention, and I could have him ask 2,000 people for money, and I doubt more than 2 people would give him a change. But Jesus said, give to everybody who asks of you. That's what Jesus said. Now, you bring that up with Christians and you'll be in an argument. Jesus said, another time he said that in another one of the Gospels, he said, give to everybody who asks of you, and those that steal from you don't require it back. So that's what the more professional drug addict does. He breaks into houses and steals videos and TVs and pawns them and gets his money for his drugs. The more honest one actually asks you for money. The dishonest one, holds you up with a knife and steals your money, and the more dishonest one breaks in your house and steals your videos. But Jesus is saying, even if they broke into your house and steal your video, don't require it back. Very few people know what Jesus taught. They call themselves Christ followers. Jesus said, if you want to follow me, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. I would say
that's not the American way.
Yeah,
when I say American way, I'm not bashing, because I know like most of you listening are American, but there's that there. I had this guy on named Dan Daly a number of months ago. We were talking about being done with church, and because he his journey about like being a Christ follower, but just not attending a specific institutionalized, service holding facility, and but being with other believers and stuff. And we were having a similar conversation. He's American, right? But we were having this other conversation, and the idea, if I remember it right, because I haven't like listened to that chat to remind myself, that I think there's something where the church is mixed in a lot more with it, like the church, the country's foundations and stuff in America, like more than your country or mine. Even though we could, both talk about our own Christian heritage and foundation and stuff, but there's something where, because there's that American dream and that idea that like nobody's going to tell me what I can't do or can do, like it doesn't matter what exactly the issue is, but there's more of that thing in the culture of the independence and being like free, like fighters for the personal individual freedom and stuff, that I honestly believe the church, and then I see this in Canada, but not as pronounced. There's this mixture of that with the church, but I've said this before on the podcast. So there's this thing where the same way that nobody's going to tell me I can't do something, that's the opposite of take up your cross and die,
Yeah.
Even I think the majority of people listen to this, they know where I'm coming from when I say that, and are mature enough to know that what I'm saying when I say that. But like by and large, like the kind of general Christian population in general that aren't in the Word or can basically fall for a guy like Trump and if he's the next president or not, but like, but it amazes.
That's your opinion.
No, but like it was that. Yes, that's my opinion. But yeah. I'm saying like, there's so, you check a tree by the fruit, and I get that there's some people who are going to support him because they think that he'll beat Hillary or Sanders or whoever. But when I listen to people defend him like he's this Christian or not even Christian, but like a great example of one, that confuses me. But anyway, I don't want to go there. I don't want to go any more in that direction.
Yeah.
Personally, I'll sit here and listen to whatever you say, but I'm treading carefully here. There's this thing where nobody's going to tell me what I can and can't do is more prevalent, even if it's in like the church. In all of our cultures, I live in Peru. I see the way the culture affects the church here in its own ways. Culture affects us a lot, or, we're supposed to be in the world, not of the world, but there's still ways our world around us does have an impact on our beliefs and our doctrine, our way of doing church. And I think it's definitely true for like the American church that this idea of and I think I'm going to back up and say, in general, I'm not going to specify the church in America anymore, just because I always have somebody misunderstand me. Not that they get offended or don't like what I say, but they misunderstand what I say. Take up your cross and follow me. Die to yourself. Deny yourself. Is against. Yeah, it's against that. That type of, I have the right, I have the freedom to do this, that, and the other. Anyway, I'm kind of talking for a long time there, but you look like you're chomping at the bit.
It's just, I think I'll write a short ebook on just that scripture: deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. The idea of self-denial. If you didn't spend $80 on those Levi jeans, you might have $2 that you can give that homeless person. If you didn't buy your designer dress for $400 and got one for $50 or $30, you might have that $5 to put in your offering plate, or the $20 to put in your offering plate. It's not, most times it's not people's lack of money that stops them allowing them to give. It's an attitude that stops them from giving. I was in this new church and I don't carry money in my wallet. I used to give to all the homeless when I had money in my wallet, but now I do everything with cards. And I was in my church and the offering plate came around, and I really like this church because it's not like some Pentecostal churches where they have a sermon around the offering, and they didn't have a sermon around the offering. I really like that. And they passed around the plate, and for the first time I was sad I didn't have $20. And a couple of days later, I was on the internet and I looked at their website and I clicked on giving and they had a PayPal. I said, that's easy. I can just transfer $20 out of my ministry account. Well, I transferred $20 out of my ministry account, and within 2 hours I had $200 worth of prophecy requests. Like I had tenfold return. And I don't give to get back. That's another popular message, because so many people in the church are giving to get back, and they get angry with God that they're not a millionaire because they've given 100,000 or they've given 20,000. But I was so blessed to give to my church, and now they've got PayPal. I can do that anytime I like. But it's normally an attitude problem that people don't give. It's not, I had a friend who says he was in India, and a beggar came up to him and asked him for money, and he apologized to the beggar and said he didn't have any money, but I've got this sandwich. And he gave the beggar the sandwich, and the beggar went back and sat next to another beggar and took half of the sandwich and gave it to his beggar friend. See, that, even the beggar from his lack could give. And, when Jesus says deny yourself, that's what you need to do in order to be able to give. If you practiced a little bit more self-denial in your life, when it comes to spending money, you'd have plenty of money to give to the Lord. Then the other thing is you need to find something that you're passionately behind. If you're, for instance, read 2 or 3 of my books and you really love my books and you keep on buying my books, you would be motivated to go and request a prophecy from me because you know that money's going to produce a book. Or you know you'd give to my ministry because you know I spend all my money on my books, and your $30 is helping a book get edited that another person's going to be blessed by. So if you have a problem, if you're listening and you have a problem with giving, find a ministry that's doing a really good job. Find a ministry. Ask someone who's anointed. So ask someone who's in ministry, what's a good ministry, and go and check out a good ministry and give to them. Support a good ministry with your money. And you'll find, you can buy a radio for FEBC, Far East Broadcasting Company. You can spend $30 and that can affect 1,000 people can listening to a Christian radio program with that wind-up radio that you bought for $30. There's so many good ministries that you can give to, and it essentially just comes back to an attitude. They need to put themselves and their lives on the cross. They've got to crucify their flesh. And I have so much money. I had enough money to self-publish books on a disability pension that I was on from the government. And then when I started my prophecy website, I just had so much money coming in that it finances. I wish I had more. I wish I had $3,000 a month coming in. Then I'd be able to publish a lot more books and do things faster. But working on one book at a time is a good pace, and God seems to be supplying all my needs according to his riches and glory.
Right.
He's got a lot of, that's the thing I want to mention too. When I started to charge for prophecy, people felt led to give me $500, but no one had given me $100 or $500 when my prophecies were free. No one saw me as a ministry to give to. But as soon as I started charging, people placed value on my ministry and started to give donations and say they don't want a prophecy, they're just blessing me. My publisher, he produces a paperback, a Kindle book, and an audio book for $129 American. Well, I got someone who gives me $128 Australian a month. I only have to add $40 Australian to that, and that pays for one of my books to get published. So that's a tremendous help. And that's just someone that the Holy Spirit spoke to and said, support him. And I mentioned her in my acknowledgements. So many people are blessed.
Oh yeah, I'm. While you were talking, I just had an email from someone whose ebook I'm doing and formatting and stuff for them, and it's been more work than I expected it to be, and I was working on an email response this afternoon saying to her, how I've spent a lot of time doing this. It was more work than I thought, and the Holy Spirit said no. Just do it for the price you agreed. And he reminded me how I've had a lot of people help me with my books. Yeah. I've had people who edited it for free. The guy who does my covers, who does all of my covers except for the published one, the one with Destined Image. He charges me a good rate, provided I don't let people know how much he charges me, because he's doing it as a favor, and even I could, share his name in the group and get people in touch with him, and his normal price would still be pretty cheap, but compared, from, cause he's based in Peru. I've had people who just for whatever reason have been, gracious, and that I'm like, I can do the same thing. I can do the same thing where I'm helping people out. And, I don't want to, let like your left hand know what your right hand is doing. But like I've had people where they pay me like $500 to like do things I would do for 50. You know what I mean? So so like when they say, yeah, Steve, send me the invoice, and then I'll pay you. And I ask them, well, how much am I invoicing you? And they tell me an amount that's way higher than I expect. In like the PayPal invoice, I'll write like $50 for work, the $450 for the generous, donation that you totally don't have to do, or whatever. And I like to write little funny things in the invoices because they're not necessary for me. And but like, God makes it all work out. Like this stuff I've got here on my desk to talk to you with, and this foam I've got in my closet behind me, most of it has been people that blessed me. You know what I mean? Like, and my wife and I have this little disagreement about like, being careful what I say or put on the internet so people don't think like I have a lot of money or something, so that they don't like bless us. They don't, and it's a fine line you walk when you're in a ministry, you're in support. I know a guy who he was in I'll be vague in case he's listening, but he was in youth ministry, and the church he was in required him to tell them how, if he ever got donations or things outside of the church, so that they could deduct it from what they gave him. And I'm like, that's demonic. You know what I mean? Like,
that's amazing.
And and I remember being.
It wouldn't prosper trust in you, would it? Like you wouldn't want to tell someone. You wouldn't want to tell your church someone just gave you $50, would you?
Yeah. No, it's like somebody gives you a car and you're like, crap, I better not let the church know, or you know what I mean? And I if what I'm saying is not true, the Holy Spirit won't bless it, but I remember being in a room with people, and he shared that with them, and they were all like, you got to leave that church. You got to get out of that church. And he's like, really? So like, I'm not, because I don't think I'm in any way obligated to tell my board of elders, outside stuff that comes in, but I remember thinking to myself, I know a missionary couple who, someone gave them a brand new car. Like they were on the mission field for years, and they just went back to their country, and they posted a photo on Facebook, and in the caption they said, we want to testify, we want to let people know God has blessed us, but we were really nervous and hesitant to post this picture because we live on support, and we didn't want people to think like that we have a lot of money, because somebody blessed us with this car, somebody, but I know what that's like, walking that fine line of being careful. Like, you don't want to testify too loudly how much God's blessed you, because that might affect your, I don't know, that might affect
your blessing.
Yeah. So it's like I'm still unlearning some of that and letting and shaking some of that off of me, and I'm kind of being vulnerable, even just having this said on the podcast for people listening. Sometimes my wife is like, why did you post a picture of your microphone on Facebook? Why did you, and, but I think it's just more like we're nervous of people, because that some prosperity type of people have kind of given a bad reputation, you know what I mean? But I don't think anyone who knows us thinks we're living high on the hog down here in Peru, in our concrete building. But anyway, so I'm kind of rambling on a bit of a circle, but I hear you, like, about the, when people view you as a ministry and they don't view you as, well, how would you describe it, before you were ministry?
Well, here's the thing. When I offered free prophecy, I think people just really saw that word free. And free just resonated with them, and so they just sang free. And regardless of whether you said we still accept donations, they just saw free, and they just had free in their head. You post a book for free on Kindle, a Kindle book for free, hundreds of people download it because it's free. They don't read it. They've got hundreds of other books that they got for free. I'd like them to read it. Like, I'd like to post, I'll give you $1 if you read my book. I wish you could do reverse things.
Do you know on my Kindle, I have like 30 or 40 books on my Kindle at a time. And the majority of them are like those $9-10 books I bought. They're hardly ever the free or cheap ones, which I do read. There's some amazing books. I think I read Praying Medic's first book because he gave it away free, or it was but like I keep buying all of his books now. Like I'm on his How to Hear God's Voice Made Simple, and I think so far it's probably my favorite one. Like I love
it's a great book. I wrote a great review of that book.
Yeah, like I've read his stories, the crazy adventures, the divine healing. I think when I read the divine healing book, I was I had written my own book, and I've read so much on healing that I'm kind of like coming to it like, okay, I can read another book on healing. I don't need another book on healing. I need to do more healing. So then when I started reading Seeing in the Spirit Made Simple, and because that's stuff I need to improve in, I'm just soaking it up. So now I just started reading the How to Hear God's Voice. But I'm saying that to say the first book, I didn't pay for it, or it was 99 cents. And that was how I got my foot in the door. And I genuinely am a fan of his books. Not just because like he'll come on the podcast sometimes or have me on his or stuff like that. Like he's becoming an author I like. And so sometimes like I've discovered people because I could read their book cheap or free. You know what I mean? So it's like there's discernment and needing to know what you want to do with your books. But my Kindle mostly has I
got my first Adam Hoog book for free, but I liked him as an author. And I kept on seeing his books for free, and I kept on downloading them and kept on reading them. And then I found out his books were only 99 cents anyway. I used to pick his books that didn't have many reviews and post a review and say author of 12 books on Amazon, as an advertisement for myself. So I like.
So that's why you reviewed my Rapture book.
What's that? No, I like to support people too. I know as an author, reviews are very important, and good reviews are like you had I think your Rapture book, you had a negative review there, and I wanted to counterbalance what that person had said. I was going to use another word. But
I don't mind negative reviews. It was just that was the first review that book got, so it automatically lowered the because my tongues book, it's got a 1-star review. I'm sorry, 1-star review from somebody who just basically says in his review, I didn't read this book, I don't need to because it's about tongues and that means this, and so I shared.
It's amazing Amazon approved it. With those words in it.
Well, it was funny. Like it's funny to me. It's not. It doesn't offend me. It's laughable. Which I think is great, because 3, 4, 5 years ago it would have been harder to accept reviews like that. And so I just basically posted a link on Facebook and said, hey, you guys want to downvote or upvote this review? The guy says he didn't read the book. And but I regret that, because right away a few people were kind of going to town on this guy. But I basically wrote like, how can you review a book you didn't read and admit in your review you didn't read it? And he just stuck by his guns and insisted, well, if you're talking about tongues, then you're not worth, reading your book. And but I didn't care so much about that, because I know not everyone is going to like my writing, and I as an author I need to get used to that, and I'm getting more and more comfortable with that. But this guy was like, I didn't read it. And it was after there'd already been so many reviews that his one negative review didn't really lower it. But I appreciated how you reviewed the book when there was only one review and it was a negative review. That affects the average. And
your book was about the rapture too, and your opinion. I forget now what you said in the book, but
you liked it that much.
There's so much misteaching about the rapture. And I felt I think from memory your book was taking a good position, a position I agree on it, and there's so much misteaching, so it was something I was interested in. I'm interested in books about Revelation, except I've got so much revelation on revelation, it's very hard to find someone who's got revelation on revelation. Even people who've written books, most of the false teaching on revelation is written by people who write books about it.
Right. Do you know who you should read?
One of the last verses in Revelation says, don't add or take away from this book. And that means adding means writing about the book and explaining the book when you've got no idea. And taking away means getting anything wrong. When you write about the book of Revelation and you get it wrong and it's not Holy Spirit led, then you've taken away from the warning. So there's a lot of people that are going to be seriously judged or even find themselves in hell because they wrote a book on Revelation. So I've shared very little on Revelation because I understand the revelation of that verse. I asked an apostle once, does this verse mean this? And he said, yes. I said, that's amazing. And I really reacted, and the car broke down. It blew a fuse when I reacted. He said, you did this? And I said, no, I didn't. He said, yes, you did. And the next year, he came out and visited again. I said, does this verse mean this? He said, yes, it does. And I said, that's amazing. There's so many people going to hell. And he said, why did you ask me that? I said, because it really concerns me. And he said, you asked me the exact question last year, and I gave you the answer. I said, I forget that. It was so important to me. You'd think you'd get revelation on that verse. Don't add to this book or take away. There's only been a few people. There's only been 10 or 20 people that could have possibly added scripture to that or taken scripture away, and they're publishers. And John didn't write that warning for a few publishers. He wrote that to say to people, don't write and teach on the book of Revelation unless you're being directed by the Holy Spirit to do so. You know?
Sure.
And
but do you know if you say, you said a moment ago about good stuff on Revelation. I didn't actually deal with the book of Revelation itself in mine. I just touched.
Holding you to account on that. I'm just very
No, I didn't take it that way. But what I'm saying is, in my book, it's just those 4 key passages. In general, I just focus on 4 passages that are kind of like the linchpin verses people misquote about the rapture, and kind of added some more at the beginning and end of that. But have you ever read Jonathan Welton's Raptureless?
Yes, I have read. There's I don't know if I've read Raptureless or there's another book like it written by someone else. Some book.
Well, the reason I ask you is because the newer version, the newer Kindle version of that book, the last third of it or so is a book about Revelation. And I haven't read very many books, but on that subject, but it's definitely my favorite so far. It's become the one I recommend people give a shot because it's totally, they call it partial preterist, and I know I'm offending some of my listeners who that's like a cuss word to them, but of all the interpretations there are, like post-trib and pre-trib and this kind of stuff, I was like, I'd never heard some of the stuff he was saying before. And then after reading it, I'm like, I can't not look at Revelation, some of the ways he presented in that book, And so anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was asking you a question. I think
doesn't bother me when people, all I know is I had a friend who used to read my articles, and he finally got in touch with me. I said in one of my articles that I let go of this friend that was trouble for me. And I must have written about the friend in the articles before. This guy wrote to me, he said, I'm really glad you let go of that friend because he was no good for you. And I've been praying that would happen. And we started to talk, and that's when I had the free prophecy site. And he asked for a prophecy, and I did a prophecy, and his mother was in heaven, and his mother spoke through the prophecy to him, wrote this letter to him, and he was really touched, and he shared it with his brothers and sisters, what Mum had said, and he was really touched by it. He requested a prophecy for all his family, his brothers, and that's what you can do when they're free. You can ask for 5 prophecies. And so I did a prophecy for all his family, and we became friends, and one time he had a dream. He saw this man standing under this tree, and then he was on an escalator going towards the tree, and he said the man had tremendous authority. He said if you've ever seen a 5-star general, they carry a lot of authority on them, and this man had a tremendous amount of authority, but I was really scared. As I was approaching him, I was getting full of fear. And as I got closer to him, his face turned into a wolf, and then the wolf smiled at me, and then he went off, and then there was a bear following him, and crowds were following and bowing down to the bear, and he said a little islander, he was from Hawaii, he said a little Hawaiian boy come and tapped me on the shoulder and said, do you know what you're seeing? And he said, no. He said, this is the Antichrist and the false prophet. And then about a year later, he saw this man in a theatre, and he said he looked like the James Morrison of the Doors. He said he looked a lot like him, had long hair, and he had tremendous authority. He was very fearful. He looked at him, and the Holy Spirit said to him, this is the Antichrist. And he's in mid-level in government now. And that was about 10 years ago, and he was in his early 20s. So whenever someone comes out with a teaching that revelation isn't going to happen, I really felt resonance with those dreams, and he'd felt to approach me and say that he'd had those dreams. So I've met the 2 witnesses, Elijah and Enoch. So when people say revelation isn't going to happen, well, I've met the guys that are going to be part of it. I've met Satan. I've met, the 4 horses of the apocalypse. Many of the people in Revelation, I've met them. I've met the Apostle John. I've met Gabriel. I've met Michael. So the angel that took the everlasting gospel to the world I believe is the gospel of grace, not the gospel of extreme grace, but the gospel of grace is like the everlasting gospel that has to go out to the whole world. So I've met a lot of the players in Revelation. So I did read one of those books. I don't know if it was Raptureless or another one, but I didn't place a lot of stock in it because it sounds like a good idea, and I really believe that Christians are going to possess more as we go along. But the fact of the matter is, Isaiah 60 says a deep darkness was on the world, and a deep. Do you know the verse in Isaiah 60?
Yeah, if you can quote it for me.
I'll share it. Isn't it amazing sometimes when arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you? For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and a deep darkness the people. Right? And then it says the glory of the Lord's going to rise upon you. Well, that's going to come true. That's a prophetic scripture of the last days, and the world is going to get very dark. One time I met Michael. There was a whole lot of saints lined up, and they were coming to this table with me and another prophet, and we were asking each of the saints a question. We're just sitting at this cafe, and there's a line of saints from heaven, and they'd just stop at the table. We'd ask them a question, and they'd leave. It's really good to get an answer off Joseph. How did you endure so many years in the prison? And you get this answer like, with my faith in God, I just trusted in my dream, or an answer like that. It really helps you. And Michael the Archangel came to the table, and I said to him, why is it getting so dark? And he said, so people like you shine better. And so this darkness is going to come to the world. It's not going to get an ever greater, ever nicer, ever better world, I don't believe. I believe the world is going to get dark, and then certain Christians are going to get this glory on them, and they're going to shine. We're going to have a last days outpouring, but when that's finished, the Lord will come. Yeah. So, but there's so many people have got strong opinions about Revelation, but it's not an essential book. The essential thing is to go out into all the world and preach the gospel and make disciples of all men. That's where
that I can agree with.
Yeah, that's where 95% of our effort should be. Eschatology should just be something in the background, but if you're driven by those thoughts and those ideas, then I think your world can get a bit skewed. I think we should maintain taking the everlasting gospel to the world and spend less time having arguments about what we believe Revelation means.
Okay.
Even though I gave you my opinion of Revelation.
Yeah, and you're entitled to it, and I have mine.
What I admire about you is you're able to listen to something that might disagree with you, but not have an argument over it, and that's just maturity. That's just humility and maturity.
I hope so. I really hope so. But it's also part it almost being 1 a.m. my time.
Yeah.
And I definitely don't have the time if I wanted to, and I would certainly be tactful about it on if I'm recording this interview for people. So that being said, I do want to wind this up because I'm going to need to hit the hay soon. I'll be less and less effective having a thoughtful conversation with you. What was I going to ask you? Because again, I don't have any notes in front of me. I'm enjoying this for what it's worth, and I'm really enjoying it. Actually, it's been like an hour and 40 minutes or so of talking, and it feels fast. Like it feels like the time has gone by fast, but it also feels like we actually know each other a lot longer than this. So, well, I'll just throw it to you this way. Is there any last, thing you want to, throw out there really quickly? Before hanging up.
I suggest everyone find someone prophetic, or find a prophet, find someone that hears from God, and get to know what you're here for. Get to know what you're born for. What you're born for is essentially what you'd like to do if you won the lotto and you never had to go to work again. What would you do with your life? Essentially, find out what you're born for and start to do it. It's time that people start to do what they're here for. Not work a job 40 hours a week just to pay the bills and then watch TV, but find something that you can spend 10 hours a week doing that really fulfills you, that you're born to do. You don't have to be the worship leader in front of your church, if you're a worship leader, to be totally fulfilled. You can sing and record albums and bless many people with little albums on iTunes. As a writer, you can write a book that may only 5 people might download a month, or 2 people might download a month, but you'll really bless those people. Find out what you're meant to do and do it. My life is so full because I'm doing what I was born to do. And I used to say to God, I really wish I could do a job where I was fulfilling something, doing something that I liked. And he turned it around. He had me do 20,000 prophecies, got me really accurate and got me really used to doing prophecies. Then he turned it around and said, now I want you to make a business out of doing prophecies, and that's going to fund your ministry. So every time I do a 10-minute prophecy, a lot of times as I'm sending it off, I'm reflecting on what God had said to the person, and I'm really blessed by what they said. So, before I'd done 20,000 prophecies, I wasn't good, but now I've done 20,000, I'm accurate and I'm happy. And I was happy to do those 20,000. So it hasn't changed because I'm getting paid. It's like a prophecy request doesn't come in and get me upset and me go to it like a job. Oh, I better do this prophecy. I'm blessed to do it, and I'm blessed to hear the Lord speak. And I'm even more blessed when like $200 is in my account now, and if $200 has come in since I sent that donation that you know about, and another $200 has come in, which means I can publish my next book. I've paid for the editing, and now I've paid for the publishing. So find out what you want to do and do it. Don't waste another year without knowing what you need to do. You know, ask someone prophetic, what do you think I'm called for? Have a discussion with them. Tell them what you think you'd like to do and what you think you're called to, and ask them to ask God whether that's what it is, yes or a no. Yes, I really feel you are called to do that, and find a way to do it, because God had a plan for your life when he created you. And too many Christians are ending up in heaven and have never fulfilled what they were called to do. So do that. And I think most of my books are based on equipping people to be better Christians and be who they were created to be. It just so happens that the third book I'm producing is on the prophetic, because I know the prophetic. So it's good for people, if they're prophetic, to read my books on that. But I can't write on that. I can't write on an occupation that I don't do. But find your dream and find what you're created to do and do it.
Sounds good. Well, let's call her quits there. This has been a good.
Yeah, it was really good to talk to you. I'd love to talk to you outside of a podcast.
Me too. Me too.
So that when I brought up Revelation, or I brought up Trump, or I brought up something that you didn't agree with, that we had the time that we can just talk through the things and hear your side, because I'd really love to hear your side on things.
I didn't bring up my side enough with Trump.
No, not really. You just basically said that you don't really agree with him. I'd love to hear reasons, you know, and have a longer talk where you're not focused. I've noticed you said about 3 or 4 times, you said, I'm just cautious of how to say this because of my listeners. Well, I'd like you to be talking to you where you weren't cautious about what you were saying. Yeah. And it's not. Yeah, I'm definitely not chained to what I say because of listeners, but it's not my country. You know, like that's one thing God's told me recently about the kind of things I post on Facebook and post on or talk about on the podcast. In some ways, there's wisdom in being careful how I share opinions of mine about things that don't pertain to me, you know, outright. You know, I don't have the right to vote in that election. It's not my leader. As much as, like you said, America is, an influential force on the whole planet. So it affects me in that way, but it's not my election, not my country, not my, in some ways, not my business. But yeah, I mean, I can read facts and put them on the internet. So it's just more like from that, I'm becoming more and more, I've heard, I don't know if you know who David Letterman is or Jay Leno. Yeah. These guys they both retired in the last couple of years. And I heard both of them say in their own way that they don't talk politics as far as their monologue, their show goes. They make fun of everything, but they don't let their audience know their opinion, who they vote for, because in America, you basically you do that. And you basically turn off half of your audience,
right? And the Lord, spoke to me about how that's kind of an approach I need to take with some of the stuff I post on the internet and some of the stuff I post on the podcast. And so I could just sense where we're going. So that's why I'm careful with some of the things I talk about.
I don't have a filter. Maybe I should. Maybe that's why I haven't got many friends.
Well, a lot of people think I don't have a filter either. But and then like I'm still recording, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then with the Revelation stuff, like, I do have a more optimistic paradigm.
I don't have any fallback if it does turn out your way. If the kingdom takes force and we set the kingdom up on earth and there's no rapture and it goes forth and God's kingdom is birthed on earth, there's no that I'm already doing that now.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to suffer any consequences, but I am prepared to use my gift and use my faith to get through a time when there's no money.
Sure, but I'm saying, see, not believing in a rapture doesn't mean I don't believe in like an end times scenario, and I'm sure you know that from my little booklet. Whether it's a post tribulation where there is tribulation and we're raptured at the end of it, whether there's I'm more towards a partial preterism where there's and I encourage you, if you haven't read that one book, just not so it can change your mind or anything, but then that you could have an idea of just like where some of us are coming from, who that's what we feel.
I'll read it. I don't think I read that. I read another book similar, Glorious Eschatology or something like that,
by Harold Eberle.
It's called a book something like that.
Victorious Eschatology or Glorious.
Victorious, yeah.
I think you're talking about Harold Eberle. That book changed my paradigm when I read it 4 or 5 years ago, and Jonathan Welton, his book Raptureless is a lot like that. If you've read that one, then this one has some more that it builds on with that foundation. But I've heard all sorts of ways to interpret Revelation. That when I read Jonathan's, it was definitely the same impact that Harold Eberle's book had on me 5 years ago. I'm like, okay, and now I have a hard time when I'm reading Revelation in my own devotional time, or it's where I'm at reading it on my Kindle Bible. I'm like, I'm just not able to get out of my mind, and some things make sense what I learned from that book. So I'm with you in terms of it's. I don't want to say it's not an essential book. I'm with you in that there's more important things to be worried about than what your eschatology is, but it
does influence your life, but
it does. Like if you think Jesus could come back next year, that's different than thinking you've got like 50 years before he comes back, or 500 years. And like I don't know if you saw the Facebook status I reshared tonight from the guy saying, if I hear one more person say we're in the last days, I'm going to rapture myself. Because I hear, I get the sentiment behind that. You know what I mean? Like every little thing that happens that's bad in the world or something is like evidence that we're in the last days. And you've been on the planet longer than me, so you've heard more and more.
Much older than you?
I don't know.
I'm 49.
Yeah, you're definitely older than me. Yeah. I'm 18. No. I'm.
You got a lot of grace, Steve. What I've learned is to be open and to embrace everyone, because the world is made up of all sorts of people, and we just got to learn to connect with people through the things we can connect through. And I'm glad people have differing opinions and differing views and different doctrines, because that's what makes the world go round, and that's what gives us flavour. The new pastor of the new church said there's different denominations, and his wife calls the church ice cream, and the denominations are different flavours. Right. And that's true, that you can go and pick any flavour you like of ice cream and sit in that denomination, but you're still in the church.
Sure.
So I really like that. That's one of the best I've ever heard, They're just eating a different flavour than us, but they still believe,
Yeah, I mean, provided they believe like the actual foundational kind of,
the fundamentals, you know? Yeah, there's so much of the church believes in an angry God, and if you read the Old Testament, he sounds pretty angry. And you've even got Jesus going through the temple in a fit, I've seen a vision of that. He turned over the tables, and the money collectors were picking up the notes, and people were scrambling to pick up money because people were poor. It was like the lotto, All this money went on the floor, and all these people are scrambling to pick up. Well, the money changers were trying to pick up the notes, and Jesus was whipping them on the back. He was hurting them so they'd get up and move. He was hitting them hard so they'd stop picking up the money and leave it to the people. So I saw that vision, and that's not a meek and mild Jesus, but it's a passionate one for his temple and for his kingdom.
Right.
That's someone who's zealous,
well, We could probably keep doing this. We could probably have another chat sometime, but let's we're nearing the 2-hour mark, so let's cut this off and be in touch about having a conversation sometime.
Yeah, we'll talk another time.
Especially since for other reasons, we do need to be in touch. So, all right, Robert. Well,
Robert means
Matthew. No,
Robert means shining one. I don't mind getting called that.
But just because you go by Matthew Robert Payne, and for some reason my brain says Robert Matthew. My eyes read the words the way they're written, and it's 1 a.m. here, so that doesn't help me say it right.
Thank you for staying up and talking to me, and I really had a fun time talking to you.
But you like
really. The best thing I liked about you was that you could disagree and still be cordial. Praying medics like that too.
Well, I have no idea. I only listened to the first half of your chat with praying medics, so I don't know what all y'all talked about.
It went on for a long time. I don't know if any will endure the end of this conversation.
Yeah, for the people that are left, we're signing off now. So say God bless to everybody.
See you. God bless.
All right, so you made it through the last couple hours. You may have noticed there were some moments where I kept my mouth shut, let Robert say what he had to say, and I think the main thing I want to chime in and say here, because he told me he appreciated that I was listening to him and not arguing, and he told me he found me to be cordial and showing grace for opinions that differ than mine, but that if you noticed there towards the end, he wanted to know what I really did think about Trump and about some of the things he said about Revelation and stuff. And I kind of, acquiesced and gave in and started to say some things. But, since it's been a few weeks, and I'm also reading his second book on angels, because I'm actually going to be recording the audiobook for him. And I want to read through books completely before I take them on. So I have some more thoughts about, what I might have said if I could go back and redo that part of the conversation, or having a better understanding from that night talking to Matthew and listening to this conversation again while I edited it and reading a book of his that goes through a lot of different stories in his life and throughout his years on this planet. I'll say this. I'll question, but I'll never make a big deal and judge somebody else for experiences God may have given them that I don't understand or that I don't think God would give someone, because I've got my own occasions where, if I just repeat to somebody that God said this or showed me that, I know they're not going to listen to me, but I have that I don't care. I know what God showed me. I know what God's spoken to me, but I definitely am not as prolific as Matthew and some other guys, and Praying Medic and others. So that being said, I still stick to the Word of God as my sure anchor and foundation for where I get my beliefs. If I can't match experiences and visions and dreams and what I think are angelic encounters in my life with the Word of God, because there's some things that just are not clearly explained in the Word of God, I don't feel. So there's things that don't contradict the Bible, but that the Bible doesn't, say are wrong. But Paul does say things like, if an angel shows up, he told the Galatians, if an angel, showed up and says anything different than what I told you, let him be accursed. Let him be anathema, depending on the translation you're reading. And, I struggled with some things Matthew shared. I admit that. And sometimes not because his experiences contradict anything that I know the testimony of the Word of God says. So there were just some things that are just, we're going to split hairs, and, how am I going to argue with somebody if they believe experiences they had are, let's just say, you can't prove wrong or right. That being said, Matthew, in his own admission, he's says he's bipolar, or he's taken medication. He admits in the conversation that he has had false experiences, and he's learned from them, and he's aware that he's been deceived in the past. So I take, on the one hand, I take with a grain of salt some of the things he says, not because in the end there he contradicts my theology about end time stuff, and I don't think the world's just going to get better and better, and nothing bad will continue to happen. No, but my outlook is a little bit different than this idea that we are in the last days generation. What do I make of his dream about meeting the Antichrist and knowing who that is in mid-level government? What do I do about how he says he knows who the two witnesses are? Well, I mean, I don't know. How do you argue with that? So, my response or my reaction, just so like you're not writing me to say like, well, are you endorsing what he said or whatever? I'm going to take dreams, visions, and angelic encounters with discernment, and I would rather go by what the Word of God says. And if it's not as clear about something, like when exactly the timing of when the end of days will take place in our human history, like if the Bible's not specifically clear about that, like people on all sides of it think, I'm not going to shout from the rooftops and be dogmatic about my opinion. But, like if you want to go back and listen to what my opinion is, there's an episode in the archives called Schizophrenic Eschatology. And so, my opinion is my opinion, your opinion is your opinion, Matthew's opinion is his opinion. But I'm personally, and Matthew might feel differently than I do, but I personally wouldn't put stock in dreams or visions instead of or over top of the Bible. So I think it's a slippery slope or really not a sure foundation to basically, like when he said, well, I know the world's not going to get better because I've met the witnesses, or I know who the Antichrist is, or stuff like that. Well, I'm sorry, I struggle with taking that as being why I would be secure in my opinion about when I think end times are. And that's just me. And so, I mean, Robert, if you're listening to the end of this and you're hearing me say that, I'm more than happy to continue having a Skype conversation in private about that. And I don't think I'm dishonoring him by adding this little addendum at the end of the episode, because in the past I've done this. Me and my friend Dan Slavin, we were talking with S.J. Hill one time about judgment and about God sending disasters and stuff like that. And we got talking about angels, we got talking about Nephilim and stuff. And afterwards, my friend Dan wanted to say some things that he didn't feel he addressed in the conversation with SJ, and we made like a little addendum at the end of that episode and put it on. So I just felt like I needed to do something like that on this occasion, only because I was really not that focused towards the end, when I was tired and thinking that any minute we were going to end the conversation and I'd get to go lie down. So, with some clarity and some time to think about it. That's my opinion. I obviously have more thoughts than that, but this episode is already more than 2 hours. So thanks for listening to the whole thing. And don't forget to check out Robert's books, because he does have some pretty good stuff to say. And, when I have any guest on the podcast, I don't ever agree 100% with any guest I talk to. In every episode, somebody contacts me to say, hey, have you looked into this guest? Do you know they hold this opinion or have that point of view? And if I only had people on who felt the exact same way as I did, or who held to the exact same opinions as I do, then I would just be doing monologues. I would never be having conversations. And I love the tension of where, and sometimes, maybe I'll have people on where I disagree even more so that we can navigate these things. But I love that tension and being able to respectfully disagree and be able to navigate some things and sort things out and not give the listener the 100%, correct conclusion about something, but that you go away and have to still sort this out, think about it, open up your Bibles, make up your own mind. So that's that. Thanks for listening today. God bless you, and fire on your head.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, you can find us in iTunes or on Stitcher Radio, or directly at fireonyourhead.com for more options. If you want to support Steve and Lily Bremner as missionaries in Peru, or find out more about what they do, be sure to head over to their blog at stevebremner.com, or check out Steve's Kindle books on Amazon and leave reviews of the ones you liked. See you next time.